All right, welcome to Crew Call with the Scooters, or Scooter One. My business partner, she's off with a little guy named Cole. But today, I'm pretty excited, very excited actually, to have Natalie Bencivenga with us. And you might know her as a former PG reporter with Ask Natalie, but currently she is doing 5 Minutes With, which is so cool. It's all these little segments of really interesting people all around. She's taking her reporting and journalism skills to the next level. So thank you, Natalie, for being with us. And I cannot wait to talk about your career and what you're doing. But first, we just talked about this a little bit, but I find this very, very fascinating. So you grew up in Pittsburgh. And where in Pittsburgh did you grow up?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I feel so honored to be here. So I appreciate this opportunity. I grew up in Oakmont.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a beautiful little suburb right outside the city. And at the time, when you're a kid, you think that these little places are so boring. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, I was so lucky. I had such a great neighborhood to be able to grow up in. And I had a lot of family that lived all within 3 blocks. So there was never a dull moment, and somebody always keeping an eye on me, for better for worse.
Did you sneak on to the golf course? Were you able to kind of run through and play golf at night when no one else was around? Did you do that? I have friends that do that.
Actually, my grandmother, so they were one of the first Italian families to move into the neighborhood. And at that time, you weren't allowed to be a member if you were Italian, and you couldn't even work there. This is going back like a long time. So my grandmother loved golf, but she had this very complicated relationship with going to the country club because she had a lot of bad feelings about it. So we really didn't I didn't play golf growing up. We didn't utilize the golf course or anything like that. It wasn't until I was a little older that once in a while we would go there for like a dinner if we were invited or something like that. But yeah, my grandmother, it was like, oh, okay, we're not going there. That's fine.
Graham, she's like, no, I don't think so.
Charge.
Now, what was your grandmother's? Is she still with us, or has she?
She passed in August, and she was like my favorite person in the world. Her name was Carmela.
Oh, wow.
And I miss her every day. She was the most fun and bright and positive woman, and very, very strong woman. And honestly, up until she passed, and she died at 94, she was as sharp as a tack. I mean, we would have breakfast all the time together and just converse about life. And she always gave the best advice. And I just miss my Grammy. So a little shout out to her.
Now, was that your mom's mom or your dad's mom?
That was my dad's mom.
Your dad's mom. Now, being Italian, I have to ask this. Did she cook? I mean, was she cooking?
So my grandmother, she wasn't really the cook. It was my grandfather. He liked to cook.
All right.
So there was that. And then my mom's side was also Italian, but they lived in Iowa. And so my mom's mother was like a gardener. We used to joke that 20% of the Earth's oxygen was in her backyard, So she had like peach trees, and she crossbred her own roses. And I mean, she was like 2 green thumbs up,
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Very different experiences. I had sort of the suburban, grandma that didn't even like to kill a spider. And then I had my country grandma that she'd kill whatever got in her way. So
I love that.
Cool.
Now, have you picked up the cooking or the gardening from either one of the?
So I do not have a green thumb. My husband and we've started a small garden with some raised beds. So we're both trying to get some things to grow. It's not going that well, but I do love to cook. I became a vegan about 10 or 11 years ago.
Okay.
And so I really had to learn to cook at that point, because there was not like it is now where there's so many products available and, it's so easy. Back then you actually had to know how to cook. So in my mid-20s was when I really learned to cook. But I remember telling my grandmother that I'd given up meat and dairy, and she just was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to feed you. So our thing was, we'd go out to breakfast, and I would take her to different vegan cafes, like B52 was her favorite. And she'd say, well, it's not real food, but I like it.
That's actually, it's supportive and kind of shocking. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she was always game for doing anything. She loved having a good time, so we always had fun.
So you went to school, and then where did you do your undergrad?
So I did my undergrad at Pitt.
Okay.
And I studied, my majors were biology and philosophy, and I minored in chemistry and have a certificate in women and gender studies as well.
So the family is like, our daughter's going to be a doctor, sure, or some sort of like, that's where you're going. This is after graduation. Natalie is going into the sciences. She's
Right.
going to cure everything. This is our daughter. And then you're like,
Well, it was funny because my mom's a nurse. My mom's mom was a nurse. My dad's a chiropractor. So they were all in the medical profession. So when I told them I was having second thoughts about going to medical school, they were actually very supportive, which
oh,
I know everybody is like, everybody wants their daughter to be a doctor or a
right.
lawyer. But having worked in the medical world, they were both like, don't do it. It's misery.
Yeah.
So I took a year off and did some exploring on my own. I'd always been creative. I was always involved in either theater or writing clubs or poetry clubs. In college, I did all of that too. And I was just very academically inclined. I loved learning and studying all different types of topics. And I was really good at math and science. And so it was easy to just say, oh, I'll do medical school. But when push came to shove, my creative energies sort of said, well, why don't you do something else? And then you can always do school. It'll be there. So I deferred. And of course, I never ended up going. But I actually, had I gone, I wanted to do OBGYN and just take care of women's health and take care of women in general. And that was my framework for why I wanted to get into medicine.
So you're like, okay, I'm going to defer. And then when did you start write? I mean, you were always writing.
I had always been a writer, and I had gotten some scholarship money because of writing and things like that. But I ended up doing some traveling in my early 20s, and I was in New York visiting friends. One of my girlfriends from college had then moved to the city, and I met this guy, Joe, and he had started a webzine. And I mean that when I say it, because it was like in Adobe Flash. Like, it was a real like digital webzine. This is early 2000s, people. This is like a different experience. Like, Twitter had just started, you know what I mean? So I was playing around with it, and he let me look at it, and it came back, because this is who I am. It just came back all with like red ink all over it, because I said, here's all the things that are wrong that you need fixed. And he was like, do you just want to do this? So we ended up partnering on it, and I ended up running it for about 5 years. And it was quite an experience, because I hired 15 writers. I got the readership up to about 25,000 readers a month. I was doing an advice column with it. I started doing web shows, because YouTube had just become like a thing around 2005, 2006. So I was doing all these different web shows and interviewing people about their relationships. It was a relationship-based magazine. It was all about positive mental relationships and healthy relationships. And so I started doing media work in New York, and I was on, of all things, I started doing, Fox News had this online web show called, at the time it was called the Doctor Hour, and it's no longer there. But Dr. Mark Siegel, who was the director of medicine at NYU, was the host, and he'd have me all the time as a relationship expert. And I was like 23. Like, what the hell do I know? So I would go on and like, give my advice. And it was really fun. And he was the one that told me to go back and get my master's in social work. He said, because he's like, you have a knack for this. You need to get some letters after your name so you can actually, do something. And so I ended up, while I was running the magazine full time, I went back to school full time, and I went to Pitt because it's one of the best in the country, and it was in my backyard. So I went back to Pitt and in 2011 and got my master's in social work. And that was truly a life-changing experience for me.
So and at that point, did you stop doing the magazine and then just focus full time on?
No, I continued running it full time. So I juggled both, as so many of us do.
It is true, but you think about the workload. So and I think it's really important. And I think about this because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to do that, but how much? Because you're pretty much foregoing everything else that's happening around you. You're going, this is my goal. This is what I'm going to do. How did you say, okay, I'm going to go to school full time and still run? I mean, what's that feel like? What is that?
I didn't think about it. It was like, I just want to do this and I'm going to do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, challenges are exciting and interesting experiences. I don't really get like afraid to try things because I've, you know, you fall down, you get back up, like whatever. I don't put that much weight on it. So I thought, sure, I'll get my master's in social work and I'll run a magazine. And it was really hard, but you know, what else am I going to do? That's how I always kind of look at things. I'm like, what else am I going to do with my time? That's what I did.
And your parent, and while you're doing this, did you have, what was your support system like around you? I mean, it sounds like you have a really strong family relationship.
Yeah, I had, you know, I had, my parents only lived, you know, 20 minutes from me. I was living in Shadyside for a while, and then I lived, you know, in different parts of the area, but they were very supportive. They didn't really, my parents, I've never, my mom always said I never needed pushed. I was always just like one of those kids that just did their homework. You didn't have to beg them, or like I wanted to do things. So for them, it was like, oh, okay, Natalie's going to go to grad school now. Like, good luck, enjoy. Like they weren't, you know,
don't fail out.
They weren't surprised.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, of course she's going to do something at some point. So.
Do you have brothers and sisters, or are you
I do, yeah. Okay. I have a younger brother, Nick, and a younger sister, Mia, and we're all very, very close. We're very close.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, and they're wonderful.
We're the oldest, so I'm the middle.
Yes.
Child in my family, so you're the oldest. You're creating paths for the rest of the
Yes, I'm the bossy one.
Yeah. All right, so you go to school, you run this magazine. At what point do you transition? How do you start? And I think that's really interesting too, because you go to work at the or is that your first kind of big break, was the PG?
So yeah, so it was interesting because I had already written for the Huffington Post. I had done XM radio segments for Dr. Radio for years.
Now hold up. I mean, you're just like, I just did this. I mean, it's pretty big because, and I'm going to say this because it is, one, you have to be a really good writer. But the other thing is you have to have great insight and great relationship skills, which I can already like feel that vibe. And we saw that when you were doing Setting the Scene with Sarah. But it's, I mean, how do you, if somebody's watching this going, I'm a writer, I want to do this, how do you get into those channels? Of course, you had the platform where people really liked you and you were like on Fox doing that stuff. But I mean, you're working for major publications and
I mean, and let me be clear, like I didn't make any money working for those publications. So like, I don't want people to have this is a hustle. You are constantly networking. You are constantly begging people to give you like an email back, to call you back. You have to be prepared to hear no all the time. Mm-hmm. I always say no is just try again later. It's not really no. You know, when we're talking about professional stuff.
I like that.
Yeah, to put that in context.
Yes, well, yes.
Yeah, it's just try again later. And so I think a lot of it came down to timing, but just perseverance. I always say like success is really mostly just tenacity. You know, just hold on, hold on and keep holding on, even when you really want to let go, if it's what you really want. And it's okay if your goals change, if your dreams change, like that's fine. That's life, you know? So for me, it was just, I made connections while I was in New York. I made connections in Pittsburgh, and I just kept following through and following through and following through. I worked with a PR company while I was in New York that helped open doors. There were so many things that people don't see. And I think people have this idea that these things just happen to you. They don't. And don't let anyone tell you that, because that's not true. You have to just hustle all the time. I'm still hustling all the time. Like that's just the name of the game when you're doing this kind of work, or when you're, you know, working for yourself. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And it's hard. And so, I did. I made my way into being able to work for a lot of publications and do a lot of different types of shows. And then when I came to Pittsburgh and was working a lot more in the city, you know, I had already contacts in journalism here just from all the different contacts I had made. So I was able to start going on to Pittsburgh Today Live. I was able to do, Ellis Cannon used to host a show on PCNC, so I used to do that. So I would literally do anything that would get me a little further down the road. Nothing was too big or too small. And no, you don't get paid to do anything. So just like get that out of your head now.
Well, it's true. And I think a lot of people do think they should pay, like they should really be paying me.
Right. And don't get me wrong, like once again, I was in my mid 20s
Yeah.
at the time. I'm 36 now. So things are different now for me. I have a little bit more leverage that I can request honorariums or payments if I'm emceeing or doing other things. But at the time, like, okay, well, if I don't want to do it, there's 50 other people that are going to do it. So you have to just weigh the pros and cons of how much you're willing to give away and what you're not. And it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, I was just like, I wanted to get out there and get out there. So yeah, by the time the Post-Gazette job came about, I had just graduated from grad school. I was working full-time as a mobile therapist. So I worked in all the different communities of Pittsburgh with children with severe mental health. So I worked in the homes with families. It was very challenging, very difficult work. It exposed me to a lot of injustices and inequities that I had never understood coming from a suburb, being a young white woman from middle class. Like, a lot of these things were not in my vocabulary. So learning from all of these beautiful people that I got to have the privilege of working with was just a very invaluable and life-changing experience for me. And it just made me a better person. But I really missed writing. I was really missing that rush of putting out ideas and people responding to them. And so my sister-in-law, who at the time was working at the Post-Gazette as a journalist, she's an amazing journalist, she and another woman who's no longer there said to me, hey, guess what we heard? The job of the scene columnist is opening up. Marilyn Yuriko is retiring. You should apply. I had no idea what the scene column was. I'd never read it. I didn't know who Marilyn Yuriko was. That was just not, I didn't grow up in like a society world. Like, that wasn't my parents didn't, we didn't do the Cinderella ball or anything. So like, I had no context of this. So I said, sure, I'll apply. I thought maybe they'll let me blog for them. And then 3 interviews later, I got the job, and I was so excited because like I knew this was going to change my trajectory, and I knew it would give me a much different space. And it was a really exciting moment. And I had just wound down the magazine probably maybe 6 months prior. We were just at a point where it was like, what are we doing? The World Wide Web was very different than when we had started, and we were both just not committed to expanding it or taking it to that next level. And I was working so much in therapy work, I just didn't have the bandwidth mentally anymore to sustain it. So it went by the wayside, as many things do.
So you get this job that is markedly different than what you're currently doing, because you're seeing life as it really, really is. And then you're going to be popped into this scene space, which is really, we talked about this a little bit beforehand too. I mean, anybody in Pittsburgh that was really doing scene stuff was a really different generation, a really different, like, it just was very different. So you get the job, and it's like fresh air coming in, and did you pitch ideas in terms of how you would look at it, or things that you were thinking about? Because I thought there's probably something there that you brought to it that they hadn't thought about, or they were really hoping that somebody else would go, oh yeah, this is an opportunity to do this.
Yeah, at the time they knew the column needed revamped. They didn't really know how to do that. So they were like, let's bring in somebody with an outside perspective, somebody that's, maybe not a classic journalist, that's not done this or that. So like I said, I didn't know much about the column itself, but I remember my very first night on the job. And this story, it was just like, you have these moments in your life where you look at it and you go, this is a moment. And as you get older and you see how all the dots connect that you don't see in the moment, you recognize this was an important moment for me. And so I had been working in the Hill District earlier that day, because I continued doing therapy work for 6 months after getting the PG job, because you can't, these are people, like, you can't just quit. So I had 15 kids, so I had to sort of wean myself off. So it was a very difficult time. And I was in the Hill District earlier that day, working with a family, a little boy who had lead poisoning from, bad housing, basically a slum landlord, and his mother had issues with alcoholism, and they were so beautiful and such a wonderful family. And I was working with them during the day, and there were gunshots right outside door. And so the mother waited with me before I left. And then she stood outside and watched me walk to my car, and just very loving and caring. And I got home and I put on a gown, and then I went to the Cinderella ball.
Oh my gosh.
And the juxtaposition of that day, of that experience, of those experiences in that day, I thought, how the hell am I going to bring any level of authenticity to this column if this is what I'm expected to cover? Because to me, that is not relevant to my life or the people around me. How do I do something here? And so I decided I was going to root the column in the work of community and provide space for people to share stories that are often left out of those columns, left out of those spaces. Show people in a way that they're often stereotyped in newspapers. I wanted to show all different types of people from all different walks of life, no matter how big their organization is or what they're able to achieve. Because I knew from my own experience of working in shelters, to try to raise money when you don't have visibility it's very difficult.
Impossible.
It's impossible. So I started a few different things with the column outside of just covering the events. I wanted to create spaces for very small organizations, fledgling organizations, called Let's Make a Scene. And so I had that idea of, well, if this is a teeny tiny organization doing great work, all they need is a little plug and they'll probably start to get support. And that's what would happen. Like, I would cover a small organization and I'd tell them, give me your wish list, and we'd put that in the column. And people would then provide those resources and that support. And it was really cool to see transformative conversation creating action. And so that was where my sort of social roots, work roots came into play. So it was a really exciting time for me because I was given a lot of freedom. I will say, like 6 years ago, they basically were like, do it, just do it.
Wow.
So I was allowed to basically dictate my own schedule, do my own work, which is, for a bossy girl like this, that's what you want. I'm not going to do well if you're micromanaging me. So just like, leave me alone. And if there's a problem, it's always better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So we'll talk then. So that was kind of how it all transpired. And then we started doing, they asked me to do a video series, and they said, we'd like you to partner with the style editor, Sarah Bachnick, to do the Setting the Scene series. So she didn't cover scene, but she was with me when we partnered for this. And that was very life-changing for both of us, because, now she's like one of my dearest, closest friends, and we were nominated for a Mid-Atlantic Emmy for that work. And just, it was really cool to get to do that together and like grow that together.
So, and it was great because you guys changed the face of what was covered and how it was covered, and there was a lightness to it, which was great and I think really important. But was there always a tension, especially since you're rooted in social work and community? And we find this even in our work, because we do a lot of fundraising. We work with a lot of nonprofits that we love. And is there a tension, or was there a tension still of going, I'm going to use this to be able to kind of go in a different direction? I'm going to use, because I would think that even your science background helps you think about things in a different way. You see the world in a different way. You kind of relate to people on a different way, or in a different way too. So as you're moving through it, was there something in your heart or something kind of moving you going, I'm probably gonna be going in this direction? You know where I'm going with this. So I mean, there's always that moment, because you said this is a moment. You've had a couple more moments in your life.
I've had more moments. Yeah. So in the beginning, I think for certain people that had always been provided, they felt ownership over the scene. They felt ownership over that space. Yeah. So I think it was hard for some people in the beginning to accept what I was doing, but I made it very clear. I wasn't eliminating. I always covered the Cinderella ball. I was in no way trying to dismantle the tradition, and I respected the tradition of the space, but there was no reason that we couldn't do and. Yeah. There was no need for it to be an either or. I covered and that's what I thought was so much fun. It's like, you can check out the Cinderella Ball, and those people that may never have paid attention to the great work being done in Homewood or Wilkinsburg or East Liberty, it's right on the same page.
Right.
So it's like they had the opportunity to expand maybe their thought horizons. And to me, that was what I was hoping for, was that people would get excited about the idea of supporting communities beyond what they've already noticed. Because that's how I felt when I became a social worker. I realized there was so much I didn't know. And once I started to understand and learn, I was so excited to want to be involved and just be supportive in any way that I can. And just providing space to me was an extension of that work. You know, I didn't ever really claim it as my column, even though people did. I just was provided a space for people to share their stories. And that's why it was important that I was always, when I wrote these stories, I didn't want them to read like I just lifted it off a press release. I would go to events and spend a lot of time and interview people that were doing the work and make sure that their voice was included in those column pieces. And also in a way that was authentic. I wasn't trying to tokenize groups or people. It had to be an organic column every week. So whatever was happening that week and was in the column, I wasn't forcing things or leaving things out. And I had an overspill. I had so many people clamoring to be a part of it. I started doing a Scene in the City, which was the online component. So for smaller events or last minute events, I was still able to find them a spot because I wanted people to be aware of all the good. I used to say the Scene column is that sunny spot in the Monday paper. So you can feel good about this community and the city that we're living in.
Right. Because you're just providing access and opportunity for people to see. And I always feel that it's like when you learn about something, you want to be able to share it and share it for everyone.
Exactly.
So I think that's really important. So as you're going through here, because you were there for about 6 years, am I correct about that?
Yes, I was there for 6 years, and I did the advice column for 5. And that column became syndicated 2 years ago.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. I mean, you've worked so hard to do all of this. So there was so I was surprised, and I bring this up because I think when you work really hard at something and you believe in something and everything, and then there's a moment that you're like, peace out.
Yeah.
That to me was really overwhelming because there's not a lot that pushes people to the brink of I quit.
Right.
I know what that's like. I know when it is like I'm done. And it is, you're pushed to a certain space. So the question I have is, and we don't have to get into details, but in terms of the tension point, it's the mix of what you're feeling, what you're seeing and everything in that moment of going, I need to be able to do what I was created to do.
Yeah.
I need to be in a space that allows me that freedom to be able to do that.
And I need to be respected.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Respect is a really important thing. I think, you know, when we start things, there's often this feeling, and honestly, I felt it myself. For a long time, I didn't even consider myself a real journalist. I feel like I hadn't earned that. And a lot of that is because of the environment that you're in, right? When people only come to you when there's a problem or when things are negative and when you've never heard a kind word, it starts to really mess with your sense of self and your sense of worth. And for me, I went through a lot of changes. Last year, I lost my dad and my grandmother within 3 months.
No, I'm so sorry.
And so, yeah, when you go through like big life things, all of a sudden, not only do your priorities shift, but your perspective changes, right? So the things that you're willing to put up with, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I'm not really here for that anymore. I am somebody that believes in you get a lot more out of people when you approach them with love, compassion, empathy, when you show them the best in themselves and encourage them to continue down that way. I've had a side business for 5 years doing digital media consulting, and I've got a lot of clients, and now I've brought other people in to work with me, which has been great. And I know that the best way to work with people is to treat them with respect and kindness. And there's never a problem. Let's just figure it out. It's okay. Let's just figure it out. Right.
Mhm.
So that's always been my mentality. So to be treated the way that I was just like, well, I can do one of two things. I can either accept this
Mm.
and stay here where I know that I am not wanted or respected or valued, or I can leave and it's going to be rough, but I'll have my sense of dignity intact. And that was just worth more to me. And I realized, I did this. I put in my 2 weeks in mid-March, and that was right when COVID hit.
I was going to ask. I mean, it was kind of like, there are moments, and I think, and it's very emotional, and you're trying not to, we're always told don't make emotional decisions, but sometimes
Right.
you're in a moment and you're like, I don't know if I can take any more of this. And
Right.
So we're in the middle of COVID and we're still in it. We have the rising numbers again. So what's you're putting in your time to go,
Right.
and that must have been hard as well because you're with journalists that you love. You have a very good relationship with Sarah. How do you kind of thinking about that?
Yeah, I always laugh and say I'm the idiot that quit a full-time job with benefits and healthcare during a global pandemic, like that's me. But, the people that I love there, I'm going to continue to support.
The question, I mean, there's a couple questions, because anytime you go through major changes, you're probably evaluating who you are and how you absorb things and what you want to put out. And in the relationship in that. So what have you learned about yourself in the last couple months? Like what are the thoughts that are going through your head right now?
Yeah, that I'm not identified by a position. My identity is not tied to the scene column. People have asked me, wasn't it really hard to walk away? No, it wasn't. I loved the work, but that's not who I am, right? And I think we in this culture get so wrapped up in our identity being our jobs, and it's really harmful. There's a lot more to me than attending events and writing about them. And I'm actually grateful that I had these experiences in the last couple of months, because it also showed me like I'm a lot stronger than I gave myself credit for and more resilient. And also that I have so many new projects and things I want to work on. And now I have the mental space to do that. And it's okay to take a leap of faith. Like bet on yourself. Like it's okay. Like even if it's not going to go exactly where you think it's going to go, like you got it, like it's okay to not really know what's going to happen next. I used to be one of those people that thought I have to have everything planned out. Like I'm not going to make my next move until I know where it is. I'm not going to do anything. Okay, so I guess you're not going to do anything then, because like that's just not the way life works. And now we're in the middle of something that none of us can control, right? With this pandemic and all of the things associated with that. And so I've taken a lot of time to just be able to rest and look at rest in a different way. I was really caught up in busy culture. I didn't really recognize the connection to that in white supremacy. So I'm learning a lot about a lot of things I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm feeling more in touch with myself, I think, than I ever have at 36. And I think that's pretty cool, because I think we assume that you're supposed to have everything figured out by these dates. We have these arbitrary like dates, especially for women, right?
Yeah.
So you're supposed to have everything, you're supposed to know everything, you're supposed to do everything right. Like throw that all out the window. I mean, reinvent as many times as you want. That's kind of where I'm at. And right now I'm working on so many different things, and I've been approached to do so many new things. And I'm giving myself that space to create. And I've never been able to do that before. So I don't know, and life is a lot simpler right now. And like, that's okay too. I don't really need to spend money on anything other than food. So it's like, if there was a time to quit your job, now would be it, because thankfully, outside of basic expenses, there's not really much else to spend money on. So
I think you realized how blessed you really are. I mean, I think you have a great education. You can always fall back on that. We always say education changes everything, it changes legacies, and we see that always. And I think that if your moral compass is pointing you in certain directions, there's an opportunity to be able to then share that, because you've gone through, we talk about the test always being the testimony on the other side of it. So it's, okay, how are you going to be able to use that and use that knowledge to help bring up whatever the next generation is? Because you have this really, you know, amazing background. It's all of these different experiences pulled together, and being a writer and how you share and how you voice and that, I think that's really it's really significant in terms of what you're going to do. I wanted to ask a question. What was the biggest no that you've had in your life that you said, okay, how am I going to change that no into something different? Because we were talking about that. You know, the no is not yet. You know what I mean? It's like, what is that? Is there a significant part? Because I think when you're going through a moment like this now, because you're reevaluating, I'm sure you're reevaluating the meeting and what was said and how things are and all of that stuff. And we go through that, right? It's like, did I make the right decision? Did I not? You know what I mean? It's like, here you are. But was there a moment at any point, it could be even on the playground at 5 years old, you know what I mean? But was there a no that you're like, yeah, this is gonna help me kind of conquer whatever comes next?
You know, I don't know if it was like a specific moment, but my dad and I had like a very complex relationship. And I look back now with such gratitude of having him in my life, because he did always challenge me. And if there was a no, it was most likely from him. But he was that person in my life that I think has made me as strong as I am today. And I acknowledge that with a lot of love, because he's not here anymore. And I know if he was, we'd be, you know, arguing about things that we're hearing in the news, and we'd be arguing, you know, but he was the reason that I always pushed myself, because we all have that person in our life that we don't see it, but they're shaping us for the better because they're tough in some ways, right? Or they don't love us as easily as everyone else seems to, or they present themselves in a way that is challenging and creates a set of challenges. And I think it's because him and I were so much alike. Sometimes we were holding a mirror up for one another. And sometimes you don't like what you see in that mirror, right? And so for me, I'm really grateful that I had someone as challenging as my dad was in my life, because I think he represented a lot of things for me as an adult now looking back, that I don't know if I would have the kind of tenacity and fortitude if it had been always, sure, sweetie, what do you need? Or yes, that's fine, you know? Like, and so sometimes I think you look at challenges later on in your life and you realize they were actually just like opportunities for growth, you know? So he definitely was the person in my life that probably helped me grow the most, even though we would probably have never looked at it that way until I got older, right? So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
Who's your person now that is helping you drive, helping you? I mean, I'm sure you have a bunch of people around you, good friends and family, but is there somebody significant kind of help you kind of translate all of this?
Yeah, you know, when I started at the Scene column, and I really recommend everyone do this, I looked for mentors. Because we didn't really have them at the Post-Gazette. I know some professions, people seem to mentor each other, but it just wasn't the thing there professionally, and I knew I needed that. So I must have had coffee with literally everyone in Pittsburgh. And eventually I ended up having coffee with, his name's Jerry, and he works in the city in marketing and advertising, all that. And I told him some of the goals I had. This was probably like 2.5 years ago. And he took the meeting. I know he took it just to be nice, because it was one of his friends that had said, hey, will you meet with her? Right. It was like one of those things. And of course, when I explained what I wanted to do, he was like, let's do this. So he really helped me create like a roadmap to get me to these next points. And also just made me ask myself, what role do I want to take in the world of media? Because as we all know, everybody and their cousins, their mothers, their friends, everybody seems to have a space right now on social media. So how are you differentiating yourself, or who are you speaking to? What is the purpose of your voice, right? Whether you have 2 followers or 20 million, what is the purpose of your voice? And so I took a lot of time to understand who I wanted to be in the world of media, what was the type of conversation I wanted to have. And it led me to, I've been working on a pilot for a talk show now for about a year. And I want to have transformative conversation. I want to talk about these structural issues that we've been putting Band-Aids on, but I want to talk about them from the perspective of millennials and Gen Zers, because we are the next thought leaders. We are the new thought leaders. So he really helped me just like shape a lot of those ideas. And so I can't stress enough the importance of finding a mentor. I have a few. I mean, he's the one I talk to the most, but I definitely have like a few other women in my life too that I speak to regularly, that have just always provided like great support and guidance. And I think it's good when it's outside of your family, because they don't have that same dynamic with you. You know, your mom can be my mom is like my biggest cheerleader on the planet, but I can't objectively go and say to her, what am I doing wrong here? Because she's going to say, you're perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. And thank God for her. But like, you know, I need somebody that's also going to say, here's what we could do.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's a new chapter. It's a new opportunity. What are you excited about?
You know, I've been working on so many new projects. I'm really just excited for the opportunity to be my own authentic self, because for, you know, a long time, when you're moving in certain social circles, when you're doing certain things, you always have to sort of have your game face on and be, you know, visibly in a specific way. And that's fine. And I'm so lucky and grateful. I can't say enough how important and impactful the Scene column was in my life. I've met so many beautiful people through that experience, and I'm just so grateful for it. But it's also really exciting to expand what people think of what I'm capable of, and expand the types of conversations I want to have. Like right now I'm working on an 8-part series with Table Magazine on food justice in Pittsburgh. So, you know, getting people to look at this person, this persona, and expand that idea, and basically like reinvent myself as somebody that wants to find ways to intersect with each other in a way that promotes justice and equity for everyone. That's always, ever since I was a little kid, I mean, those things were important to me, but now I'm fully capable of steering that ship in a way that I just, you know, haven't been able to in the past. So it's exciting. It's scary. It's overwhelming. I'm exhausted. But that's all normal. And it's thrilling. It's thrilling. So I have no idea where sort of the journey is going, but for the first time, I feel like that's actually okay, because we are collectively all reinventing right now, whether people understand that or not. The world that we knew 4 months ago, it will never be the same. I mean, we've not only had the pandemic, but now with the Black Lives Matter movement and the recognition, where so many of us saw it already, but now there's this real awakening to a lot of issues that need attention. I'm really excited and hopeful that the world could turn out very differently and be so much better for so many more people. And I'm hoping to just be like a teeny tiny little part of that transformation. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, that's a good place to be. I think that's amazing. I appreciate you so much for being with us today. And thanks for being so honest and truthful and sharing how you feel. But I'm excited for you. I think the Table Magazine, they're always so beautifully shot. We have friends that are photographers there. So I'm super excited to read it. It'll be amazing. And you know, good luck and are just exciting for what's coming next for you. I mean, I think it's really all these times, I think when you have a time like this to be able to reflect and kind of put it into perspective, I think there's a lot of fine tuning that happens. And that's exciting too, because I think you're going to be honing your voice even more, which is, it's going to be good for everybody. So thank you so much. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you and for this opportunity. So
yeah,
thanks.
Absolutely. Well, have a good week, and keep us posted, up to date on what's going on. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.